Welcome this morning to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Meadville, a beacon for free thinkers since 1825. This morning, our Reverend Alex Holt and our congregation member Susan Hagel will be collaborating for the homily. During the service, people can certainly enter their personal joys and sorrows in the chat room, and then I will either read them or summarize them at the proper point during the service. And as usual, I ask you to continue to sustain this church with your financial gifts, either by donating electronically or by sending a check to the church. This month's Share the Plate recipient is the Meadville Free Clinic.
Good morning, everyone. The opening words this morning are from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote, "Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives."
As Reverend Alex lights the chalice, please feel free to recite the chalice lighting words with me. They are by Kimberly Ann Tomzak. I can't see what her last name is. And so, you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms out to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Please also feel free to recite with me the unison affirmation of covenant and mission. And remember, you're muted, so you can feel free to say the words right out loud. Our covenant is to be a loving, joyful community that nurtures spiritual growth, promotes compassion, social responsibility, and service in an atmosphere of mutual trust. Our mission is to be a faith community devoted to love and respect, reason, and justice.
Many thanks to the Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for creating our February song, Gather the Spirit.
Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in thanks. Gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in spirit.
As you listen to our remarks, Susan's and mine, please reflect on the following question for conversation during the breakout rooms after we speak. The question is, can beloved community come true in the world, America, and Meadville? Now let me introduce Susan Hagel, who many of you know. I visited her and Chris last Sunday after I did a wedding up in Edinburgh to do and we did a class on Zoom. And I mentioned to Susan about beloved community, and she said, oh, I know quite a bit about that. And I asked her if she'd be willing to do some reflection on beloved community with us this morning. So she will speak first, and then I will speak second. Thank you, Susan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and eager to share some information with you. As you know, beloved community is a pillar of our Unitarian Universalist Association, and it has been so for many years, probably at least 2 decades now, early 2000s, maybe even earlier than that. It is often associated with and really credited to Martin Luther King, but actually the concept of beloved community has been around since the early 1900s. It was initially introduced in 1913 by Josiah Royce, and Royce was a philosopher. He was born in 1855, died in 1916, but he was the founder of American idealism, and his beloved community concept was a big pillar of the American idealism concept. And so, as I said, he introduced this in 1913, but then died in 1916. So he really didn't have a whole lot of time to sell it to America as a real concept. But here were the pillars that he introduced and that Martin Luther King really embraced and ran with during the civil rights. So Royce said, the beloved community will be one, rooted in love and loyalty that one has for the community. He really felt that the community trumped the individual and that the focus needed to be on one's community. 2, that community exemplifies the best of everyone because we all work for the best of the community, not for our individual benefit. And 3, and this was the hard part that people really questioned, he introduced the phrase, the now and the not yet. And so the now is, what is our community doing right now? Are we growing? Are we expanding? Are we embracing? Are we being loving, etc.? And then the not yet was this ideal, this perfect beloved community that we were supposed to be building and striving to get to. And so the question then became, is the quote, not yet, just an ideal? Is it some kind of concept that's never really achievable because we can always do better? And the religious elements of the American idealism movement took that to mean heaven. So the not yet was, we're never going to get there. It's this perfected ideal. So that will be heaven. Whereas the more liberal and earth-based members of the American idealism community said, no, hang on, we can continue to strive and always work towards finding this particular concept, this really beloved community within our time on earth. So there was some debate about what the term not yet actually meant. So after it was introduced, it flourished briefly, and then it kind of went underground until Martin Luther King really discovered it, embraced it, and began saying, hey, everybody, we need to be thinking about this. Within Martin Luther King's vision, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute, he said the beloved community, and these I think of as the quote middle years of this concept, is a society based on justice, based on equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. So very similar to what Royce had introduced. And Mr. King's beloved community sought to end poverty, hunger, homelessness, racial and other forms of discrimination in all ways, and works hard to replace such bigotry and prejudice with a spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. So how does this happen? How do we create this beloved community? MLK had a vision, and his vision was really the nonviolence resistance as a means to change the world. And I have a quote here from his autobiography written in published in March of 1959. I left India more convinced than ever before that nonviolent resistance was the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. It was a marvelous thing to see the amazing results of a nonviolent campaign. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community. End of quote. Within his vision, change does not seek to defeat or humiliate the opponent, but to win his friendship and his understanding. MLK stressed that the ultimate end of violence is to defeat the opponent, which isn't what he wanted. He saw that the ultimate end of nonviolence is to win friendship of the opponent. And he then discussed the concept of nonviolent opposition by saying it is necessary to boycott sometimes, but the nonviolent resistor realizes that the boycott itself is never the end. It is merely the means to awaken a sense of awareness and shame within the oppressor. And so this is a way to make the oppressor become aware and move towards a willingness to reconsider, etc. So the aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community. And I would like to make a reference to the disruption that's going on in Myanmar right now and the nonviolent protest of everyone just lying down in the road. May it be making the oppressors become both aware and possibly producing some shame so that we can see some change there. So that was the vision. The vision is the nonviolent resistance. What is the means or the method to make this happen? Well, we talked about the boycott, nonviolent choice, but he also said there were two important elements. One was love. The type of love that MLK and Royce both stressed in their very similar but yet different proposals is not a romantic or aesthetic love, nor even a reciprocal love that one would find between friends, but it is that agape love, that love which is understanding goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing, spontaneous love which seeks nothing in return. He claimed, this is Martin Luther King's words again, love is creative and redemptive. Love builds up and unites. Hate tears down and destroys. The aftermath of the fight with fire method is bitterness and chaos, but the aftermath of the love method is reconciliation and creation of our beloved community. It is the love of God working in the lives of men. It is this love that may well be the salvation for our civilization. So love was one of the pillars. The other element that he said we needed for our method to work is moral law. He said we all have a personal conscience, an internal sense of right and wrong. We see it when we see something going wrong within our society and we just think, no, that's wrong. We just know that that's wrong. We also need, in addition to that personal consciousness of right and wrong, we need a personal commitment to align our human societal laws and policies into a congruence with what we see as moral law. So we need to be committed to right injustices that we see through nonviolent means. So that was the method. And then what's the result? Result is that creation of the beloved community, winning the friendship of the opponent, which makes it possible for men to live together as brothers in a community, the beloved community, not just brothers and sisters, in a community, the beloved community, and not to continually live with bitterness and friction. Within the beloved community, a new relationship comes into being between the oppressor and the oppressed. How? It comes about through transformation And that transformation includes reconciliation and redemption in Martin Luther King Jr.'s plan. We, as the UUA, have taken and embraced that concept of the beloved community as a pillar of the UU Church, and we added one more element. So the third R, so not just reconciliation and redemption, but also respect. Respect of ourselves, respect of others. So within our beloved community, UUs believe that we can create a world in which every one of us belongs just as we are, a world of equity and affirmation, a world of fellowship and freedom, and a more livable world for all of us. The danger is we don't need to create it just within our church walls. We need to then take it and go outside of our church into our community and extend that so that we can make the world be a wall-less church. We want to extend our beloved community beyond just those that we see within our church walls. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let's take just a moment. Let's take just a moment of quiet so we can take in Susan's words and the concept she's sharing of beloved community. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here this morning. Thank you to Kirsten and Corinne as service leader, and Amy, who is off today. She's actually has a Sunday off, so blessings for her as well. And a special thanks to Susan for volunteering to do that wonderful presentation. And I'm going to mention actually the close words that she mentioned toward the end, because I was reviewing the slides that originally she was going to put into the slideshow that we have for these services. And that particular set of phrases stood out for me. Our beloved community could be a world in which every one of us belongs just as we are. A world of equity and affirmation. A world of fellowship and freedom. A world more livable for us all. Not just within our church walls, but within our community. And those are powerful ideals. I have to say, though, that I am cynical at times that beloved community in the world, the whole world, can ever come to pass. But as Susan mentioned, Unitarian Universalism, as well as Unitarianism and Universalism, have believed in beloved community for many, many years. Next Sunday, I'm going to speak about beloved community here at church, as well as the current work of the UUA. And I'm going to probably title it Beloved Community versus Beloved Individualism, because there seems to be a dynamic tension between those two right now. Some of you may have seen the YouTube link that we put in the B&B a couple of weeks ago. Reverend Dr. Laura Adams King spoke about beloved community at this year's Martin Luther King Jr. dinner here in Meadville, virtually, of course. And she, like Susan, emphasized the words of Martin Luther King's vision of beloved community, the 3 R's: reconciliation, redemption, and respect. And she reminded the audience that beloved community does not yet exist. Certainly the family and friends of George Floyd would agree. So would all the other Black Americans, families and friends who have been killed or wounded by law enforcement. Trayvon Martin would agree, who was shot and killed by civilian George Zimmerman in 2012. And it is not just racial injustice. around beloved community. I think about the parents who were separated from their children at the US border with Mexico. How about people in this community, especially single parents, who are working 2 or 3 part-time jobs just to pay their bills and rent? And the list can go on and on about, does beloved community exist yet in the world? And is it any wonder that we find it very hard, or at least I do, find it very hard to believe in beloved community any place, let alone the whole world. So I wonder if maybe we are setting our sights too high for right now. Do the 3 R's, for example, apply in our families? Do they apply in our jobs, in our education? And of course, the church here where I stand today. Maybe beloved community can be defined another way. Some of you may have heard of Henri Nouwen, who was a Dutch Catholic priest and activist. The UUA has a program called Soul Matters, and the curriculum this year, which we're using this month, is about beloved community and Nouwen's words of what he said beloved community could become. He said in part, beloved community is a place where the person you least want to live with always lives. Beloved community is a place where the person you least want to live with always lives. In other words, those people who we might not like very much are entitled to be in the same community, subject to the 3 R's, reconciliation, redemption, and respect. So to be in beloved community means that the troublesome person who we really don't like actually does have the potential to move beyond selfish ego and anger. They can learn to forgive and be forgiven. However, Nouwen's quote doesn't end there. The whole quote goes like this. Beloved community is the place where the person you least want to live with always lives. That person is always in your community somewhere. And in the eyes of others, you might be that person. This is, to me, that's a good reminder that beloved community isn't a place where everyone is always kind and gentle and never has a bad temper. Beloved community is not a place where there's never conflict or hurt feelings. But beloved community at any level is a place where tools of engagement, compromise, and forgiveness can build bridges between people. And personally, I think that beloved community starts small, not the whole world at the start, although we hope it gets there, but it starts small, sometimes invisibly, sometimes publicly, and oftentimes spontaneously. Here are some examples of it from this week. You'll hear in Joys and Sorrows a little bit later that I think of, particularly today, of Cynthia Burton, who is in hospice care at Westbury. I sent flowers on behalf of all of us yesterday to her. And the card read, "To Cynthia, from all your friends at church with abiding love." And others have sent flowers and cards as well. And I've seen over the last year and a half I've been here, how many times you all have been able to display beloved love towards people like Cynthia and so many others. I think of all those people who come to the AA meeting I attend at church. We may, and we do, disagree about religion and politics, but we care and we support one another's sobriety. That's beloved community too. We can look further to the headlines of the news. Even with all the nasty language and emotions and government officials going off to Mexico, we can find the presence of beloved community. I'm sure all of us have heard and watched the tragic events in Texas this last week. On Tuesday, a major grocery chain store in Texas was packed with shoppers seeking food, diapers, water, and really whatever they could get their hands on to be able to get them through this next week. The checkout lines were long and people had their credit cards ready because whoever has cash these days. And then suddenly what happened was the power went out and there were no generators. No cards could be used. Nobody had cash. What to do in these lines of 30 or 40 people for each checkout line in carts that were loaded with food and other necessary items? Well, the store manager actually had written instructions from the corporate headquarters on what to do next. As each customer reached the checkout stand, they were waved on and told to get home safely. Everything they carried was free. Perishable and non-perishable foods, diapers, water, and much more. And it didn't end there. The icy parking lot outside was crowded with people of all ages trying to get to their cars. People helped move cars, held packages of groceries for one another, and helped the elderly get to their vehicles. I would say that is an example of beloved community at work. And also in Texas, the roads were so icy that cars and trucks spun off the roads. People were panicking because no tow trucks were available. And so there was one guy who had a huge pickup with these oversized wheels that was an off-road vehicle and very heavy duty. And he was driving along, being very careful, and he came upon the sight of dozens of cars and trucks off the road with desperate people trying to get out. So he happened to have tow chains. And so he decided he was going to get everybody back on the road. And he spent hours pulling cars and trucks to parts of the road where people could drive safely. Others were badly stuck, so he drove them home to their homes. Those are just two examples. Thousands and thousands of people in Texas and elsewhere started helping neighbors and strangers everywhere because this is what beloved community was all about. Spontaneous, necessary, in a time where we move beyond our own concerns and our own desires and our own egos to help others. So shortly, we're going to go into the breakout rooms. The question I'd invite us to consider again is, can beloved community come true in the world, America, and Meadville? Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is the point in our service where we talk about the joys and sorrows that people have told us about. The first is that Cynthia Burton is at Westbury in hospice, and cards and flowers are appreciated, but it appears that right now no visitors are allowed. And Peggy, I think you have some other insights to share.
Sure. I can tell you that Cynthia is conscious and content and pretty peaceful. We, as Unitarians, we all have different spiritual, some of us have different spiritual beliefs, but Cynthia had a dream that she died and she went to light, and she was disappointed when she woke up. and that has brought her a lot of comfort. So I just want to share that with you. She's really pretty, I don't want to say happy, but you know, the kind of the mundane stuff of life and treatment and discomforts and pains is all there. You know, bad hospital food and that kind of stuff, that's all there. But there's a deeper level of Cynthia that is in a really good place right now. So I just wanted to share that all with you. And if anything changes, she really doesn't have the energy. When she was in the Meadville Medical Center, if I could say this, I was the one person who could visit her. The medical center has relaxed their COVID restrictions so that one visitor per patient per hospital stay is allowed. That way, if somebody gets into a health issue, they can be tracked more easily. And so I spent most days with her, an hour or so most days with her while she was at the hospital. And there's just, she's in a pretty good place for being ready to let go. We all know that she's had a long struggle for many years.
Thank you, Peggy, for sharing those insights. One final joy and sorrow is from Laurie Parendes and Mark Wickenheiser. They want you all to know that they are experiencing a joy for their son, Owen, who was just offered a summer job with the U.S. Forest Service out of Leavenworth, Washington. He's going to be a wilderness ranger, and that's right up his alley. And now I invite you all to take a few moments of silent reflection on the joys and sorrows we've just heard here today, as well as all of those that remain unspoken but in our hearts. As Alex extinguishes our chalice in the church, please say with me the chalice extinguishing and closing words. These are from My Walk Is Not Yet Ended, Nelson Mandela. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom come responsibilities. My walk is not yet ended. And now I'd like to invite as many of you as are able to stick around for a while for our virtual coffee hour. Unless you choose to leave at this point, you'll be assigned randomly to a small group. And this session will last, I'm not sure how long, maybe half an hour?
Yep.
Okay.
Michael, you are you are muted. Would you like to move to a breakout room? Did you see a prompt on your screen? If not, I can resend a prompt to you. You are muted, so you would need to unmute yourself to speak.
I got lost here,
Okay.
but I guess I'm back with video and with sound.
Yes.
Okay,
Do you see a prompt now to join room 2?
I do, yes.
All right. If you click on that, you will be taken to breakout room number 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.